Well, welcome back, everyone, to A Beautiful Church podcast. We are interviewing various nonprofits around the Metro Chattanooga area that have a long-standing history in this area. And so I have with me in studio today my friend Tony Souder.
Glad to be here, Adam.
Welcome, Tony. So, Tony, tell us, just give us the basic, your title and what you do, just a tiny bit. And then I want to ask you just personal questions. Who you are and where you come from.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. You didn't tell me this was going to be a personal.
I know. Well, I mean, look, people want to know who's the guy behind the curtain is.
Okay. Yeah. He's a short guy. Tony Souder with 100 years.
You should spell that out loud just for those that are only listening.
Yeah. So it's Tony.
Yeah.
I thought you'd like that. Souder, Souder, and I am the CEO of 100 Years and the founder of the Pray For Me campaign. And we serve churches here in the Chattanooga area through and nationally through two primary initiatives. One is the Youth Leader Collective, which serves youth leaders, and the other is Pray For Me campaign, which builds intergenerational relationships through prayer.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. And I can't wait for us to get into this because it's a fabulous ministry. I was a youth pastor for 13 years, and to get a little teaser, I hated almost every product that came across my desk. I was just like, this is worthless. This won't actually help kids. It's terrible. I know. Maybe no diss to the people who publish lots of stuff, but everything that came across my desk, I just thought, this is not going to actually help the kids that are in this ministry. But Tony's product, I guess you could say, was, I thought, this is absolutely fabulous. Every church could use this. This is the kind of thing that I sought after and wanted to see my kids use. So we'll get into that in a minute. So, Tony, let's start with the beginning. Where are you from originally?
Originally, I was born in Valdosta, Georgia. And my dad was in the Air Force, and so we ended up moving to Virginia Beach, Virginia. Lived there for about 11 years. And
lived there for 6 years.
Okay. No crossover. I know there wasn't any crossover. You're younger. And then we lived out in California for a couple of years, south of San Diego. There's not much south of San Diego, but Chula Vista is south of San Diego.
Wow.
And then he wanted to retire back on the East Coast, and so we moved to Eastern North Carolina.
Okay. You said Carolina.
Carolina. Right there, yeah. That's right.
Carolina. All right. And then how did you end up in Chattanooga?
Okay. I was a youth pastor in Atlanta. And in the process of doing ministry there, we had a relationship with a group that called Reach Out Youth Ministries. And they did training with youth leaders around the country. And they were partnering with a group here in Chattanooga who was looking to start the Chattanooga Youth Network. And I was hired as the first director of the Chattanooga Youth Network.
And you're segueing perfectly into my next question. So let's talk about the genesis of this organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the genesis was I was the first full-time director hired for the ministry. It was under the organization called the Chattanooga Resource Foundation. They're the ones that hired me. They were, I like to say that they were kind of an entrepreneurial networking organization, Bible-based Christian depth, that would look at the city and say, what are the needs of our city, and kind of start asking questions, how can we meet those needs? And so when they did that, as far as looking at the next generation, they realized, okay, how can we help the young people in our region hear the gospel, respond to the gospel, and be discipled in healthy environments? And they looked at a number of different things during that time, but they said, these aren't feasible because we're not going to be able to hire people, campus ministers for every campus in the city. It's just too cost prohibitive. And so, but they realized, okay, wait a second, we can come alongside the people that God's already raised up for our city, whether youth pastors, volunteer leaders, part-time leaders, whatever, around the city. And if we helped them and connected them and coached them and cared for them, then we could raise the water level of impact with the next generation pretty significantly. And so I was hired in 94, and which is 30 years ago. If you're trying to do the math, I saw you started looking off to the right. That's it's 30 years. 30 years ago. I help you. I'm here for you. So 30 years ago is when this all started, and you guys have been doing some cool stuff since.
Just curious, how fun or difficult were those initial few years?
What's interesting is that there was some people here in town that wanted to make this happen. And so they actually funded the first 2 years. So when I was hired, they said, hey, look, if this works, you've got a job. If it doesn't work in 2 years, you won't have a job. Well, 30 years in, by God's grace, it has worked. And it was very interesting because you had a lot of people saying that people don't want to do things together. And the reality is that and I'm not exaggerating. I'm prone to exaggeration, but this time I'm not. So I would go talk to a youth pastor here, in Chattanooga, and they would say, I'd be totally willing to connect with other youth leaders, but there's all this competition and stuff like that. I'm willing to connect, but there's competition. I'd go right down the street, have the same conversation, and it's almost like verbatim. I'd be willing to connect with other youth leaders and stuff like that, but it's just competition is going on. And what we found is that there really wasn't that. There was a sincere desire to connect with each other and do what John 17 talks about, so that we could display the beauty of Jesus in our city by working together. And it was not that. It was really just laying a groundwork in the city that that the people down the street we're not in competition together. We're not adversaries. We're actually on the same team, and God's doing some cool things when we come together to do it. And really figuring out what that looks like. I mean, because sometimes when we say, hey, I want to do stuff together, a lot of times we have preconceived ideas of what that's going to look like. And that could be totally wrong. And that becomes a stumbling block for doing things together. So we try to hold things loosely and see what God did. And God done some pretty cool things.
Yeah. And I'll just validate that. When I was in Virginia Beach, that's kind of how I got here, is that I was working with a lot of youth pastors and bringing them together to work together. And I would just say, Chattanooga and Virginia Beach are two totally different towns with different church cultures, but the youth pastors were way easier to get together than pastors. Not that it wasn't working and you still had to do all that kind of groundwork, but there's just a totally different culture, I guess. Youth pastors are slightly different birds.
They are.
Okay, so let's keep going with the story. So we got 2 years in, and it was working well enough to where they said, let's give this guy more of a shot.
Yeah, we started raising more money and to be able to stay in the game. That's really, that's always the case. I mean, if you have a mission that people care about and it's worthy to be investing in, then you invite people to be a part of that. And God was raising up people to be a part of that. And we were able to raise the money we needed to keep going. And as we did, he started opening doors for how we could work across denominational lines, racial lines, and so forth to be able to impact young people around the region.
Let's talk about because I know some of your stories. So I'm trying not to lead it too much here, but let's talk about what it was for the first few years before anything else developed out of it. This is networks of pastors, youth pastors getting together.
Yeah.
And they're they get together, exchange best practices, hold themselves up in the midst of that work. Because I'll just say, thing I've just learned is sometimes it's that they get a fresh word that they needed for that week or month that they were gathering, and it keeps them going, kind of a thing. But just sort of speaking to what that was like, because you were the guy, you did everything, you were making the whole thing go. So speak into that a little bit, and then how Pray For Me started to develop out of that over time.
Okay, so what we would end up doing is I would meet across the table from youth pastors. That would be a regular occurrence every week. But then we would also have these regional gatherings of youth leaders that were weekly as well. And so we would find these leadership communities, and we would create these leadership communities. We called them networks at the time. And so they would come together in different parts of the city every week. And the goal is that, we're trying to create an opportunity for people a safe environment for leaders to be able to speak into each other's lives. Maybe we would talk over different aspects of articles or books or different things like that, or we're kind of seeing what the needs are, it's happening, and somebody raises up, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, and so we're able to speak into that, and then they're able to get. And many times, what will happen is that you get your next layers of individual meetings coming out of that because you find out what's happening, and so I'll say it this way: the thing that kind of internally shapes how we go about those gatherings is prayer, accountability, care, and training. So a friend of mine started a ministry called PACT, Prayer, Accountability, Care, and Training. So is
that
Matt Brinkley? Yeah, Matt Brinkley. And so
time out. He's just been a phenomenal force for influencing and discipling so many youth pastors.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
We should give a little bit of because my mentor in youth ministry was mentored by Matt.
Oh, yeah.
That. So,
yeah.
There's so many people that will cite his name. If you don't know that name, you should know that.
So the years that I was in Atlanta, I met Matt within the first 2 months that I was in my church in Atlanta. He was in Montgomery, Alabama. So I went over, he hosted a retreat in Alabama. Ron and I went over to that retreat. That was when I first met him. And then a year later, he took on the youth pastor position at Perimeter Church in Atlanta. And so we would meet weekly with some other guys in the Atlanta area. And it was from that really God had no idea. God was really forming kind of my approach to investing in youth leaders by hanging out with Matt, and then when I had the opportunity to come here, that was kind of like the DNA of how we're going about what we did.
He's the grandpa of a lot of different ministries that are out.
Yeah, there's no doubt. God's used the ripple effect of that man's life is extraordinary.
Yes. Okay, so PACT,
prayer, accountability, care, and training. So when we're thinking about when we come together, whether I'm talking to someone individually, I'm finding out how I can pray for them, which allows me to, they're bringing their needs up, so I can figure out how I can hold them accountable in some way. It's all informal. It's not like this written agreement or anything like that. It's all informal. And then I'm also figuring out what needs do they have that I can care for them as well. Accountability, a care, but then I can also speak into their lives with training. But we're doing the similar thing in those area networks. So that's kind of governing that's behind the scenes. I would be directing the conversation and asking questions and shaping those moments. But also in the process, helping these guys understand that they can do the same thing with their volunteer leaders when they're connecting with them, finding out prayer, accountability, care, and training arenas. So that was really the shape of what we're doing. We do those across the table. We do the area networks. And then even back then, we did a thing called the Chattanooga Youth Workers Convention. Because we said, okay, we're ministering face to face, we're ministering in smaller groups, but how can we help the leaders that we're serving in this region be able to bring their volunteers and really serve those volunteers as well? So it'd be a weekend thing, it'd be a Saturday thing, and it was an all-day Saturday thing. It was very much like Southeast Youth Leader Conference is today, but Zach's done a far better job than I did back then. He's just made it better.
Zach is the guy who runs that.
Tony's
built people.
So we did that for 4 years.
Okay.
And we continue doing those core ministries, those core aspects of the ministry. We just kept doing those, and we continue to do those today. But probably 18 years in, we realized, we realized that the research is showing that young people are exiting the churches in ways that we never imagined when we first started. And as we saw that, some of the reasons for that, but then one of the things that struck our attention was this, is that those young people that stay connected to the church and flourish in their faith tend to be marked by having multiple adult believers investing in their lives. Now, a lot of times it depends on the grid you're reading that in or hearing that in. So I hear it this way. I hear it, okay, this is bigger than what having a good volunteer leadership team. We want to have that as a youth ministry. You want to have that. But we've had that for years, but we're still losing young people. And so, what the research shows more is that they need to have this outside of what's happening in their family and outside of what's happening in the youth ministry. They need these multiple adult believers outside of those areas. So really deep into the church, they need relationships of adult believers that are investing in their lives. And so we said, how can we make that happen? If that's true, how can we help more adults connect with more young people more naturally than ever before? And so this is where, mentally we started making a shift and saying, let's dig into that and figure out how we can do that. And what we did that for a number of months. And what slowly came to the surface was that what we now know as the Pray For Me campaign. It wasn't easy by any stretch, but
from the time you sort of realized that to having the book in print out, what's the time gap?
Oh, so look at you.
I've seen something way back that was like an early stage of that.
Yeah, there's some iterations.
Yes.
There's definitely some iterations. From
you were almost like what's the term when they're sort of test marketing almost. I mean, that's not what you were doing. They weren't your guinea pigs. You were actually doing it as ministry, but it just kept kind of moving forward.
Yeah. So we had the concept of the Pray For Me campaign was there. And what we realized is that we were calling it something else. It wasn't the Pray For Me campaign. We were calling it was what was it back then? It was horrible. That's what it was. It was a terrible name. It was
important to have an effective product.
Oh my gosh. It was the Generation Builders Initiative.
Yeah, that is.
It's terrible. It is actually terrible. I knew that. I just outed myself on the front end so that you wouldn't have any.
I can just affirm you, validate here.
It was, but I thought it was great at that moment. And then I remember teaching a class at my church of senior adults, and I'm thinking, this is going to be great. I had 5 weeks. And then at the end, I said, I invite you to be a generation builder, somebody that's willing to invest in the next generation. I had 20%. 20% out of that class did it, but I had 5 weeks to convince them. I realized at that moment, we're dead in the water. This is not going to, nobody has 5 weeks to do this. I'm the brainchild of this, and I have, it's not working.
Right.
And I remember it was such a good gift from God. I remember walking through the hall at our church, and this sweet little lady named Wilma Dietzen comes up to me and says, Tony, she was in the class. She was one that was signed up as a generation builder. She was in.
With you.
She was in. She said, Tony, I really don't know all I can do for young people, but I do know this. I can pray. And at that moment, it's like all the ingredients for the Pray For Me campaign were there. We were just named it wrong, and we weren't putting them in the order that would empower other people to be able to catch it quickly. And it was then that we shifted, and that's when I started writing the book and putting it all in a tool that would allow the adults to be able to have something tangible to be able to take with them and be able to invest in.
When you started with this, you didn't think like, I'm going to get this to the place of a book. And wasn't the initial. It just sort of moved along in that.
Yes. And some of it is, Adam, is that I'm very conceptual. And so I connect things that maybe aren't on the plate. So I'm making connections that seem like, okay, this is strategic connection. And I was doing all that, and I had conceptually, I had it working in my head. But even when I would tell good friends, okay, this is what I'm thinking. It wasn't like I wasn't getting any traction whatsoever until I finished the book. And when I wrote the book and I said, okay, this is what we're doing. It was almost like then it became real. It's like you're saying words, but they don't mean anything yet until there's something real, something that they can touch, and then they can do something with that. And that was very important for me to understand that not people don't think the way I think. That's probably a good thing in a lot of ways, but as far as for moving this forward, it wasn't until I wrote the book and we were able to say, hey, put it in people's hands, and people say, oh, this is good. We can do this. Yeah.
So, let's actually dive into how it actually works. So, and listen, you can just go buy the book if Tony's just too conceptual for you here. But explain how it works, and I'm going to, of course, jump in, but I think.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you bought the book's not going to tell you how to do the Pray For Me campaign. The book is just a prayer guide that helps you helps you have a clear traction on how to pray in a very defined way for young people. The way I say it is this: I think about Colossians 4, where Paul's talking about Epaphras. And I call it the Epaphras principle, but Epaphras is struggling daily in praying for the Colossians that they would be made mature and complete, that they would look like Jesus, that they'd be transformed into the image of Christ. And when I'm thinking about the prayer guide, it's got 7 essential categories that really praying through the lens of those things. That's what we're aiming at. What Epaphras is aiming at. We're not. Like if somebody wanted to pray for revival, they could use this to get there, but this is not the direct route for praying for a revival. This is about praying for Christ formation in the life of somebody else through these 7 essential categories. Whereas there's lots of things that can be prayed for, but this prayer guide is really designed to do the Epaphras kind of work, heavy lifting of moving people towards praying for our kids, our grandkids, the people that are in our churches, the young people in our churches, or our other people. They don't have to be just kids, but adults that really we want to see Christ formed in them. And so that's what the book's going to provide. So the way it works is a church says, hey, look, I want to do the Pray For Me campaign. So they announce it to their church. They say, hey, we've got 25 young people in our church. We want every one of these young people to have 3 adults from different generations who will be what we call their prayer champions. Not because they're the best, the champion prayers, but they're willing to champion the cause of this young person before the throne of God. And so that means we need 75 people that be willing to pray for these young people. And so you get those people sign up, however they sign up in their church, on the internet, through cards in their Sunday school classes, however they sign up. You gather those people, you got the 2 groups of people, you connect them together. We used to do it a little bit differently, but I'm just not even going to go there. So you have an event where you've connected these young people with 3 adults from different generations who will be their prayer champions, and you have the event so they can meet those adults. Because the reality is that most young people have no clue who the adults are in their church.
Right. No relational inroad.
No relational inroad at all. So this is somewhat of a deviation here, so bring me back. Make sure you come back. Is that one of the reasons why young people are exiting is because they're growing up in our churches and we live in the illusion of relationship. So we're walking around next to each other, but we don't know each other. And that happens with adults too.
Right.
And so, but as adults, we walk through our churches and basically we're walking through a sea of adults that we know there's something goes south in our lives. These people are for us. At least we hope they are. And so, but young people are walking through the same sea of adults and they have no clue that these people are for them. And if something goes south in their lives, how would they even these people be able to engage with them because they don't know each other? And so the Pray For Me campaign is really designed to help solve that so that that this young person can get 3 adult relationships, prayer relationships this year, and then we get 3 adult prayer relationships the next year. And so if they just did it from 6th grade to 12th grade, they would have 21 different adults in their lives that have prayed for them in a significant way from 6th grade to 12th grade.
So just for clarifying for people, so each person gets 3 people. Who are those 3 people?
Adults from different generations. So they might have a 30-year-old, a 50-year-old, and a 70-year-old.
Okay. And then does that 30-year-old, 50-year-old, and 70-year-old, do they pray just for 1 year, or do they pray every year until that kid graduates, or how long do they pray for?
We're inviting them into this for 1 year. But reality is that they
Usually stop.
They don't usually stop. And usually the challenge we face is they just want to keep that one kid. And then we have to remind them, hey, well, we won't, you can still pray for that young person. But the reality is that other young people need relationship with you. And so we need you to be a prayer champion for another. You can still pray for Billy,
right,
but we also need you to pray for Mike, right, this year. So
just, some churches, as you know, are geared with a youth ministry. Some have quasi to non-existent youth ministry, and some are deliberately almost anti-youth ministry. They're geared toward just a family kind of ministry, or they'll have a different way of wording it. But this works for either or all 3 of those different kinds of things, because it's kind of like a companion, strengthens the youth ministry, helps youth pastors get those volunteers if they need them, but also works in a complete family ministry setting where everybody's all in the same kind of church. That's how it's worked. Did you was the family ministry thing even a thing when you started? I guess it was when it was coming up. Did you write it deliberately to be able to hit all of those, or was that just like, no, we just had this tool and it just so happens to work in all those directions?
Well,
it seems like genius strategy there.
I like the word. Anytime you use genius and me in the same conversation, I really like that. It's not true, but I really like it. The one of the things that we were thinking is because I've been in youth ministry for a long time. Yeah, so you're paying attention to what are all the dynamics that are out there that if you promoted this to a church, what would be some of the reasons for them not to do it?
Right.
So you're evaluating all those things so yes, those things were in our minds. And so as we're creating it, we are getting to the place so that there wouldn't be any reason for somebody not to do it.
So speak to, how you did this to where it has broad denominational appeal, because, I don't want to out you here, but Tony's a kind of Presbyterian. I'm a kind of Presbyterian, but there are lots of denominations that, all Bible believing really, for the most part, that use this. How did you get it to where it was? Did you put, C.S. Lewis, when he wrote Mere Christianity, handed it to like a Catholic and to an Anglican, Baptist, whatever, and they're all like, yes, we signed off on this. Did you test this with other people, or was this just your years of working in different denominations that you knew how to write it for them? How did that work?
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of the second.
Okay.
You
just knew what they were going to come back at you with.
Yeah, you kind of understand after a lot of years of working cross-denominationally, and how do you need to frame things so that you're not unintentionally alienating somebody just because you use the word wrongly, or not even wrongly, but a way that they don't prefer it. Right. And so trying to look at that. So we're paying attention to that. But then the other thing too is I just looked at my own journey. Part of what God putting me where I've been for the last 30 years is my journey before that. I came to know Christ in a denomination of one sort, and then the journey from that denomination to where I am today is pretty different. And so, and understanding that people are where they are for lots of reasons, and so our goal has been to meet people where they are, and not really feel like I needed to make a case for my rightness and their wrongness in this situation, or any situation really. So that's shaped kind of how we've done our cross-denominational lines ministry for the last 30 years. But so as we're thinking about this, it also shaped it when there's certain things that it was going to have our flavor, and the things that I believe that were really, really important to me and growth and if the greatness of God is a key component of how God has shaped me now coming out of my own personal life with my wife's health. My wife's had severe health problems for an extended period of time, which can't really not be said, because the Pray For Me campaign exists because of God shaping me and my heart around prayer through decades of difficulty.
Do or die. Really.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so realizing how important prayer is of sustaining me as a person, but also tasting of the greatness of God in prayer is what we're trying to bring to people with the prayer guide. Now, we're not coming out and saying that is exactly like I just said it, but when we're talking about on each page, it talks about see, savor, share, seeing the greatness of God in Scripture, life, and creation, savoring it for all it's worth, and sharing it for others. So I introduced that in the book, but so each day of prayer, it's going to have, how do we see the greatness of God in this passage? How do we savor the greatness of God in Scripture for this young person or for this person we're praying for? And then is there something about what God's doing in me as I'm reading this and praying this that I should probably write down that I can share with somebody? And so those things are really, really key for me. And I'll say this, I was nervous writing. I feel like I had put some stuff really deep inside of my heart that I was trying to get out. But being a kind of Presbyterian, sometimes kind of Presbyterians can be not as nice as you would like them to be.
Yes.
so I'm very generally speaking.
And we're allowed to say that.
Yes, that's right. But I remember one gift God gave me is that there was a pastor who's at a Presbyterian church. And again, they're kind of voices in my head as I'm writing because of the things that could be said. And this is what this guy, he wrote me a long email. He says, "Hey, look, I just want you to know, I'm not really into these kind of campaigns." And I wasn't really excited when this elder brought it to me. But don't fret right here, because there's goodness coming. And he's telling me that there's goodness more in this email. And he said, but the more I got into it, I started reading and praying the prayer guide. And I think I said something really Christian, like, "Dang, this is good." It's like, what I realized is that, and here's somebody that's very astute, very wise, very sharp, intellectually, but he was addressing it. He was responding to the things that God had been working in my heart for a lot of years. And so getting that feedback was important for me. I didn't know how much I needed it, just to instill confidence, because you got the other guys that aren't going to say anything.
Sure.
But I don't even know what the questions were now. So
no, well, I got more questions moving on. You're answering just fine. So, one thing that I do want to comment on about this is that it really does. First of all, you're heavily scripturally based. It's not just Tony coming up with whatever. It's also like a great discipleship tool for everyone that goes through it. So if you're looking for like an additional discipleship thing that sort of stays in front of people and deals with them and causes them to dive into Scripture and even grow their prayer life, this is a good tool for that. But it also that it's intergenerational. Right now I can't hardly think of many pastors that don't have some level of community problem at their church, where people just aren't deeply connected. And so this thing works for the family ministries and the youth ministries, but it also works for discipling your people, getting them to pray, which, that's epidemic in churches too, of like hardly have an existing prayer life. And then that it actually builds community where people know each other, and not just like people the same age, but across the generational lines. Can you speak a little bit about, let's just segueing from there, a little bit about how it brings about community or any of those things I talked about with discipleship? And are there any good stories that you're like, hey, here, this, take it, regale us with some stories, Tony, of how you've seen this work in the past?
Yeah. So it is probably in the last 3 months. In the last 3 months, God's done he's really shifted some of my thinking in a positive way. I mean, it's shifted in that. So for 10 years, Pray For Me campaign's been around for 10 years. And so we've been talking about the importance of intergenerational relationships, that these are vital for a young person to flourish in faith and life. And how do we create this? And the Pray For Me campaign does create those. But the thing that's been solidified in the last 3 months, I've been mulling it over for longer than that, but in the last 3 months, I realized that meaningful intergenerational relationships gets us somewhere. And where it gets us to is a place that if this doesn't happen, then the future of the church is not as bright as we would like it to be. Okay, so here's I'm set. That's the stage I'm setting. So here's what came to kind of seared into my mind and heart recently, is that God has designed us with a longing to belong to Him and to His people. Yep. So there's this vertical and horizontal piece. We tend to leave people and places where we don't feel like we belong.
Absolutely true.
Okay, so that's all true, and there's implications of that in lots of areas of our lives. Barna research shows that young people are growing up in our churches and they do not feel like they belong. Now, here's the aha moment. I've been talking about these things for 10 plus years, but here's the aha moment. Why are we surprised that so many of our young people are leaving our churches and their faith after they graduate from high school when this is the case?
Right.
What it tells us is that, okay, if we need to aim at creating a sense of belonging for these young people, or they will likely just be at default will exit. Not because they have some intellectual problem here. Sure. They just don't feel like they belong. So the Pray For Me campaign gets at that. So when I look at, here's some research you probably know, but Pine Tops Foundation says that if nothing changes, over 40 million young people could walk away from a life with Jesus. I misquoted that. Over 40 million young people raised in Christian homes could walk away from a life with Jesus by 2050. Now, we're not even talking about doing evangelism outside of the church. We're talking about there's an opportunity right here in our midst of these are the people that are in our churches, that are growing up in Christian homes, that are growing up and then walking away, if nothing changes. And I believe that we need to have a fast track to creating belonging, which is almost like an oxymoron. That how do you fast track belonging? I mean, it takes time. Right. Well, what I've seen in the last 10 years is God using the Pray For Me campaign to fast track belonging. So here's a couple stories. One story is this. It's definitely one of my favorites, if not my favorite. So I was at the beginning of 2020, before the world changed. I was.
January.
Yeah. That's right. It was January. I had a vision of doing what I called walking with the wise conversations with a host of people. I was talking to people, who would you consider wise? Who are the top 3 people you'd consider wise? And then I was creating my list. I was going to meet with these people throughout the year. And so I was in January. I was meeting with my first guy. I went all out, took him to Panera. We had just unleashed. And so I was just drinking deeply from his well. okay, asking him good questions, just drinking from his well. At the end, we're getting ready to leave, and he says, oh, by the way, our church is in our 5th year of doing Pray For Me campaign, and I still pray for the first 4 young people that invited me to pray for them. But this year, my guy's Isaac, and I see Isaac every week and ask him how he's doing, ask him how I can pray for him. But the other week, Isaac turned to me and said, Mr. Allen, how can I pray for you? And at that moment, Mr. Allen kind of paused and looked at me and said, I told him about my cancer. And not too long after that, Isaac's mom comes up to Mr. Allen in church and says, look, you need to know that Isaac will not let us get through prayers at supper without praying for your cancer. And I'm thinking, this is an incredible story. I'm thinking the story's over. But then he pulls out his phone and he shows me a video, somebody videoing him, and it's at his ringing the bell ceremony for his radiation treatment. He completed his radiation, and there's probably 40 of his friends there with bells, and the person's videoing him, and he calls Isaac up. Isaac's at his ringing the bell ceremony. He calls Isaac up, and he tells him, he says, we do this thing at our church called the Pray For Me campaign, where adults are connected with young people, and they pray for them for the year. But it's not just me praying for Isaac. Isaac's been praying for me. And what I realized is that in a very, very short period of time, God had fast-tracked belonging. These 2 people felt belonging to each other. And neither Mr. Allen nor Isaac's life is the same because of that. And I believe that that's what God wants to do.
It's belonging, but it's also, I think, ownership. And this is another Matt Brinkley thing of like, you give the students actual ministry things to do, and they not only feel like they're a part of it, they have ownership of it, and they can they're usually fast tracked for being able to do ministry, being competent members later, but they won't do that if they don't know, they're not connected to adults. That's a fabulous story.
Yeah. So that is definitely one of my favorite stories, because it just illustrates the how quickly that even the young person realized, they got stirring in him. Well, I can pray for Mr. Allen too.
What are the age groups of kids that get, what's the youngest that you start them at in the Pray For Me?
Yeah, it can be done from, kindergarten through college. And when I say that, it looks different in all those. In youth ministry, middle school and high school, we try to encourage where young people are getting connected with 3 adults from different generations to be their prayer champions. In 5th grade and below, we do it as families, because we're not going to ask, the parents are the gatekeepers of the home. And so you're connecting really a family with 3 adults from different generations to pray for the kids of that family. Whether you have 1 child or 5 children, 5th grade and below, you get 3 adults who are going to be praying for your family, your children. But what happens is that it builds community across the board. That was your original question. How are we seeing it build a community? Well, what happens is that parents love to have people that are on their team for their kids. And prayer is the most basic aspect of the Christian life, and it is a gift from God, and it creates a connection between people that is, I think that's why it's a fast track, because God designed it in a way that when I pray for you, and I'm sincerely praying for you, then God's connecting us in ways that are supernatural. It's not just a relational thing. There's a supernatural thing that's taking place, and because I care about you in a way that He's stirring up in me, because I want to see good take place. And so that's what's happening with the families so when I say kindergarten through college, kindergarten through 5th grade, it could be younger than that too, but it's easy to just say kindergarten through college. 5th grade is the first segment, then youth ministry, and then it can be done in college. But at college looks very much like the youth ministry looks. But usually you're challenging students to create these relationships, especially because a lot of times they go off to college. Right. They're going into new church settings. I mean, part of what we want them to experience in their home church setting is that they've experienced the beauty and the wonder of a relational connection with the people of God. And so when they go off to college and they get up on a Sunday morning and they're getting dressed and their roommate looks at them saying, "What are you doing?" "I'm going to church." "Why would you do that?" "Because these are the people that have loved me all my life." And so when they go there, that hopefully our goal is that they would be trained in being able to connect with a youth pastor or a college pastor that can help them connect with other 3 adults from different generations to pray for them.
Be comfortable talking.
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk about the success of this. How many languages is it in now?
It's in 3 languages. The 2 strong languages. One is I say it's weak just because it's and technically it'd probably be 2 languages there too, but the Chinese.
I was going to make a joke about your English skills. Or something.
Yeah. I've got, yeah.
It would have been funny had I gotten it.
You wouldn't, you didn't get in there fast enough, but because we've been talking for as long as we've been talking, they know that my English skills are not what they need to be anyways. So you didn't even need to make a joke.
Okay.
So English,
okay,
to whatever degree that is, and then Spanish, and then Chinese, simplified and traditional.
You can translate all those on your own.
Yeah, I just started just squiggling the lines, and I figured, okay, this got to mean something somewhere.
The Duolingo app is how you got there.
Google Translate.
Oh, okay, yeah, it'll be completely. No, I think that it's just a cool story of how you've got that going. I love it. What are we? Last I recall, we were at 15,000 copies sold.
Oh yeah, we're further along.
No, I know that was years ago.
Yeah, we're further along. We're probably in. No, I don't know exact numbers right now, but I know that.
Not give him that question ahead of time.
I know that we're well over 30, 35.
Okay. Yeah. So just keep me updated every now and then. No, that's wonderful. 30,000 copies of these books sold. So I bring that up to say, this isn't a fly-by-night thing. This isn't something that is just my opinion. There are obviously other people and you're not a marketing powerhouse. I mean, you don't have tons of money going into this. There's no major Christian publisher that has taken this, that would have sold. And this wasn't just a tool that some person that wasn't simultaneously a practitioner put together. This is a guy who, this was his thing that he did for years, really decades before you got going with this. And then it's really your life's work put into this product, so to speak. And then it's been, now this might be a little bit of a tell, but you told me that you started with the Amazon publisher where you could make a new iteration. So what edition are we on technically?
Oh, I don't need technically that there's probably, oh my gosh.
I'm just trying to give people confidence in the product that they're buying today. 30,000 people.
They should have complete confidence that they're getting a high quality product that they would go to any bookstore and get. If we sold it in bookstores, we sold only on our website.
Yes. So that's just another, in my opinion, testament though, that you've got that many copies sold, but you're not, this, it's not been something that's just for mass marketing. This is meant to be an effective tool by the people who have been in this trade, really. And I do need to say, you told me so every time, it was test marketed with a small audience, but then as you put it out there more, there've been feedback and people that said, here's a hole in it or kind of a thing, or you need to tweak this. And so you've got all these editions that were on your shelf. The iterations that you're talking about, that's so early on. I mean, that was the primarily with the first. These are the stories that I've heard from Papa Tony.
Yeah. The iterations. So we started with, again, Amazon.
Very refined.
Yes. Yeah. We've refined it for sure. We had no idea what we were doing at the beginning. Realistically, fortunately, Amazon had a create space at the time. Now it's Kindle Direct Publishing, but fortunately they had that because that allowed us to be able to take what we did, put it in the system, get a book back and say, okay, this works, or this doesn't work. This is wrong. We forgot this. So that's where you get your iterations. There's these little tiny nuanced things that we're tweaking in the first, I'm going to say 10 iterations. But you mentioned something about, we test marketed in Chattanooga. Yes, we had 8 churches, 4 different denominations, ranging from 50 members to 1,500 members. We're trying to say, hey, is this going to work in any setting? And what we found is it did. But then right after we launched the test, we started getting calls from children's directors saying, hey, this is great. You're doing this with teenagers, but we really need to start younger. And I had resisted that because that was my background, youth ministry. I didn't,
right.
But God in His goodness, won me over through this one tenacious woman out of Calhoun, Georgia. But we rewrote the book, aimed younger as far as when prayers and stuff, added a section on giving blessings, and then we decided, hey, we need to do something for students. Prayer is the most basic aspect of the Christian life. It's the component that if you think you're walking well with God and you're not praying well, then you're fooling yourself. And so how do we help students to be able to pray well for themselves and their peers? And so we did a student guide. And then most recently, we did a grandparent edition to help grandparents leave a legacy of prayer deep into the future for their grandchildren. We've got it down to pretty much a fine science now, and by God's grace, we've had the right people on our team throughout at different times because we were learning as we went.
Yeah, and I would even just say, having known you for like 10 years now, I've even seen you grow in your confidence of what the Lord has been doing. All right, so I need to keep moving with this interview and get down to some business here. So let's say I'm a member of a church, or I'm a pastor, and I'm a youth pastor, a children's ministry person, or a children's ministry volunteer, or whoever I am in a church. I'm hearing this podcast, and I am like, okay, I've been sold for 20 minutes now. What do I do to get this in my church? What do I need to do?
Yeah, you need to go to our website, prayformecampaign.com, probably get the Quick Start Kit, which is a digital download. That gives you everything you would need to know to be able to launch the Pray For Me campaign in your church. That's that. And then our team is readily available to be able to help you walk through any component of that. But that we've designed that so that you won't necessarily need our team, because people are launching it in over 800 churches in 47 states. So we can't be everywhere. So we try to create the resources to be able to solve that for people everywhere.
So asking questions I already know the answer to. Do you have cool videos?
Absolutely. And we're creating more cool, super videos every day.
Excellent. And do you have to have one champion, multiple champions? Sorry, I'm using the wrong term. I'm using how many people do you need to get this started in the church? How many people have to be willing to get this going? Well,
you need one person that's willing to champion it to the leadership, and then once the leadership says, hey, this is a no-brainer. We want community. We want our young people to have belonging. We want this to be in our churches. We want our young people to flourish in faith and life, beginning with prayer. Let's do this, and then it's a matter of really just, hey, look, when do we want to start this? At this juncture, you would start it in the fall, most likely, August, September, October. And then you'd have your launch date, and then you have your launch event. You identify your prayer champions, connect those with the young people, and you're off and running.
Do you have step-by-step instructions that help people through this? So if you're scared, you don't need to be scared, because they literally walk you through it. And if just throwing it out there, I know that this is just trying to make sure I'm trying to alleviate any possible fears. And if I get stuck, you've got great tech support.
Oh, absolutely. The step-by-step instructions are in the Quick Start Guide. Yep. And the tech support on all levels are are readily available to you.
This is a great team builder right here, and his people are amazing. So I'll vouch for the whole team. They're all really sharp.
Yeah, great staff.
And
We're
nice.
very thankful. Yes,
They will not be insulting if you call with a question that you feel is not that smart of a question.
Well, yeah, we're here to help you.
Yeah.
Our desire is that your church and the young people that you serve in your church or your family would have the prayer relationships that they need to flourish in faith and life.
So going back to the youth collective for a moment here.
Yeah.
I'm a youth pastor and I want to get involved, or I'm a senior pastor and I think, my youth pastor needs this. What do they need to do?
They could do a couple things. One is that they could go on our website, go Youth Leader Collective. .com, that website. So 100 Years, again, has its own website. If you went to our100years.com, then you're going to find Pray For Me and Youth Leader Collective on that website. And then you'll click on that and that'll take you to their own pages that help you to kind of understand what all's available to you as a church, whether you're a youth leader or you want to build the belonging and through prayer for the Pray For Me campaign. But if you're a pastor out there and you're hearing this, then you need to know that there's really some cool things that you could take advantage of. One would be that our Southeast Youth Leader Conference that we host every year. That's always the last or the third. I say it's the last weekend of August. It's before college football starts. It's the weekend before college football starts. Out of necessity and wisdom. Right there.
Yes.
So, but that's an all-day training for your youth leaders and their teams and their volunteers. They have keynote addresses, but also probably 21 different training opportunity breakouts during the day, all designed to help a youth leader or a church invest in the people that are serving the next generation in their church. So that's one thing they would want to pay attention to. The other thing is that if they have a younger leader, we've launched this year a leadership cohort, primarily designed for younger leaders, but wrapping around what I call the three-legged stool, strategic ministry, personal walk with God, and family life. And so we're aiming at those three things because we realize that if any one of those legs of the stool goes out, the whole stool goes down. And most time we just want to pay attention. Most time churches pay attention just to the strategic ministry piece, but we focus on all three of those, and that's a year-long cohort. There's cost in part of that, but it's so that is paying for there's three-day, 2-night retreats related to that, about 7 day intensives that are a part of that. And so that would be something you really would want to pay attention to. And if you have any questions on that, you can reach out to us through our website, and we can be glad to sort out any kind of questions or concerns.
Just to say it explicitly in case someone didn't pick it up, Pray For Me campaign is, you can be pretty much anywhere in the world and run that. And Youth Collective is much more regional.
Yeah, it's more Southeast regional. Yep.
So just sort of moving toward the closing of this interview, how can our listeners be praying for you? You're just giving here's a request.
Yeah. There'd be three ways. I had mentioned, my wife's health. Just pray that God would give favor there. He's been very gracious to us, and he still is. And he's used what we call the dark ages to produce something that is touching people in ways that we never imagined. But that we would just be able to, that I would be able to care for my wife well. So that would be the first, and that God would maybe give her a measure of health that's more than what we have experienced at this point. We're very open to that. And just so you know, your listeners are a variety of listeners, but we have we've done the spectrum of Western and Eastern medicine. We've done the spectrum of the prayer. So it's not like we're new in this game. And so I don't need. This is what I don't need. I'm going to say this person. I do not need a flood of emails of things that I need to consider. Not because I don't think there's other things we need to consider, but we probably already considered it. But so I even feel uncomfortable even saying that part of that. But
I think people need
the secondly is that we're 30 years in, and God's crystallized some things, and we want to be able to advance what we're doing in both of these arenas under the banner of 100 years in a strategic and accelerated rate. Because we believe that young people need to know that and experience and taste and see that the Lord is good, and that being a part of His body, the people of God, is good. And that's not going to happen without relationship. And being able to fast track belonging through the Pray For Me campaign around the country, pray that God allows us to do that. And some of that means honing our strategy. Some of it means raising money to be able to accelerate it. But that would be that's really a couple ones in that one.
It's like 2 A and B.
And that we would continue having the right team. How do we grow and have the right team that allows us to do those things? Those are the three things: family, accelerating things, and having the right team that's going to help us to accelerate things.
Amen. Okay. And then just to put something in people's hearts, what would you envision or hope come out of this ministry that we would see? I mean, you've kind of spoken to it, but if you're just summing it all up, and even the bits of this interview and the heartbeat that you've got, what's your vision? What's your hope? What's moving you? Like, say, can you just see this with me? Can you just envision this and drive for this with me?
Yeah. And what I would love for you, let God give you a sense that what it would be like for you as an adult, or you as or your child, to be able to be excited about going to church, and being with the people of God, that was their safe place. That was the place, not that we're huddled up to ourselves, but that they knew that the people of God loved them. And I believe that, kind of like the Mr. Allen Isaac story, that is not very far away from it being experienced. And I want that churches and church leaders and adults across the country to be able to start saying, wait a second, we know our church needs this. If we could fast track that means in the fall, by December, there could be relational connections that we never even imagined, and that there is a sense of security and a sense of belonging for our children and for our people together that we never thought was going to happen, because we're experiencing none of that now.
Right.
But in just a very short period of time, that could happen. And I would just want to invite people into that possibility in their churches, and which in turn creates bold freedom to love people outside of the church.
Mm.
Because when we feel secure and we know that God is with us and for us in the people of God, then we're not afraid to go out and love people in ways that we wouldn't have when we were alone,
right, in
a crowd in our churches. So that's what I'd like to invite them to.
No, you can't. We have to close this out. But you've opened up a whole can of worms of like what happens when you're intentional with these things, and when you've almost trained people within to be bold in relationship, how much easier it is to be bold in relationship outside of the walls of the church. But we have to close. So, Tony, thank you for being here. Fabulous discussion, fabulous work. And I just want to say thank you for how you've invested in my life over the years. This guy gives his time to other nonprofit leaders when they're like, I need advice. Tony, help me. He's just that kind of a guy, and he's been that for me. So I want to publicly thank you for that, and for just the work that you've done and the life's work that you've got going on and the legacy that's going to be. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. Thanks.
Hey everybody, just wanted to let you know about our website, praychattanooga.com. If you visit, you'll find all sorts of resources that will help you develop a stronger prayer life. For pastors and ministry leaders, we have prayer networks that meet all across town from Lafayette to north of Saudi Daisy. We have prayer resources that help you learn more about prayer and deepen your prayer life. And we have retreats that are happening here all the time. You can come for a custom retreat, or you can come for one of the ones that we host. You'll find all of that, again, on our website, praychattanooga.com.